Hello everybody! In today's video, let's go through all of the controllers I own because I realized that actually I have a lot of them and I actually have lost count how many I have. So yes, let's start small and go through the things I have for Osu. I know Osu is not an arcade game, but well, let's just go through all the rhythm game things I have. But yeah, for Osu I use a CTL Force 71. But basically it's a Wacom 1. The thing is, before this tablet, I actually used a Gaomon SK something tablet, and I thought all these Chinese tablets were bad because, well, for whatever reason, the cursor would freeze whenever I press down too hard or press down the pen buttons, all that stuff. I hate Gaomon pens. I hate Gaomon tablets. You see, the thing about this tablet is that when I press down on my nib, the cursor and the tablet will freeze. And it happens if you press the mouse buttons too. So when you grip your pen the wrong way and you accidentally press the mouse buttons, it will freeze. And that happened just now while I was playing. But all Chinese tablets so far, they always have this freezing issue. Don't buy a Gaomon, Huon, whatever tablet. Just buy a fucking Wacom, guys. Use a 480, I know. I need to go find one. I think I'll buy a Wacom 1. But turns out it's not the tablets. It's just that Windows drivers are kind of fucky. So as you can see here for this tablet, the pen buttons are ripped off. And that's because with the pen buttons on, whenever I press down, the cursor would freeze. So it's not because of the tablet, it's just straight up Windows. I also have a knockoff SIM pad. It is also a hot swap, by the way. I got it for very cheap. There is one really interesting thing about this knockoff that I noticed is that, well, you'd think that this thing uses Kale hot swap sockets, right? It doesn't. It uses these round capacitive touch buttons that I have no idea where they got from. I tried looking on AliExpress and Alibaba, I just have no idea what these sockets are using. If you guys know what sockets this uses, please let me know because I am genuinely extremely curious. Over here we have a Lotus keypad. Actually, I have two of these things. Well, three actually. I have one prototype, one frosted, and one crystal fade. I gave the prototype and crystal fade away. I just keep this here for inspection reasons. We don't talk about Lotus Pro. But yeah, and then lastly, I have this 3-key keypad that I made. Lotus was taking forever with making their 3-key keypad, and honestly I have no idea why. It took me a month to make this. I'll talk about how I made this like next time, but not in this video. I know this is not a controller per se, but I do own an iPad Pro 2017 version. It is the first iPad Pro that has a 120Hz screen, and that's why I chose it. Because the other iPad Pros that are newer are just way more expensive. So yeah, I got this second hand, and it's a very nice iPad. I love using this thing. You can see all the games I own here. Yeah, my sister made me download that one. Extremely solid device to play mobile running games with. If you're ever looking for a tablet for running games, just straight up go with iOS and get the iPad Pros. The cheaper end would be the 2017 version, like this one. And alright, now for the actual fun part. Let's go through the controllers I own. Starting with Sound Voltex. This is the Sound Voltex Force 2 controller from Gamo 2. If you have no idea what Sound Voltex is, it's basically a game where you press buttons and turn knobs. It is very fun, but the barrier entry is extremely expensive due to the fact that you need a controller. Out of all the Sound Voltex controllers I've owned, this one is actually my favorite. If you guys remember my review video for the Force 2, I actually had two of these. One of them had the default knobs that Gamo 2 gives, and the other had arcade knobs, like the same knobs as the arcade. And the thing is, as you guys can see from here, I only have one Force 2 box instead of two. So what happened to the second one? Well, I sold it. And guess which one I sold? I sold the one with the arcade knobs. This one uses default knobs. I like them way more than arcade knobs, so I straight up did not mind just getting rid of the one with arcade knobs. However, I actually did swap out the parts on this default controller. The default controller originally had Chinese buttons and Honeywell switches in them, but I've changed them out to use Sanwa buttons and Omron switches. Speaking of Sanwa buttons and Omron switches, you can buy them with today's sponsor, Buyee. Buyee is a Japan proxy service. Basically, if you have something that you want to buy that's from Japan and the seller only ships to places in Japan, you can still buy it with Buyee. When you buy Buyee, the seller in Japan ships to Buyee's Japan warehouse, and then the Buyee warehouse ships it to you. Buyee supports buying from Amazon.jp, Mercari, Rakuten, Yahoo Japan Shopping, and Yahoo Japan Auction. You can buy arcade parts like Sanwa buttons and Omron switches with Buyee. By the way, those Omron switches are actually getting discontinued, so you might want to hop onto buying extras while you can right before they completely disappear. And yeah, if you can't get yourself a Hori Tatacon in your country either, you can import it from Amazon.jp with this service too. There are also other things you can buy like Konami e-amusement passes or secondhand Wacom tablets if you're an Osu player, or straight up just buy Japanese merch. Like me and my sister recently bought Ado plushies together. Gosh, they're so cute. I need to get the Usuya pajamas next. Not to mention, if you buy multiple products from different stores, you can use the package consolidation option they have to combine all the packages into one giant package, so you only need to pay for shipping from them to you once. It'll save you a ton of shipping costs and you get your giant Not Yet Christmas package in one go. So use Buyee today. Sign up the link in the description to get 2,000 yen off your first purchase. And now, back to the video. Alright, and now to talk about my next sound Voltex controller, and that would be my Yuancon. So you might be wondering, where did the buttons go? That's because I actually sold a set of Chinese buttons to a friend, and that's kind of why this thing is blank. I don't know if you guys know this, but Yuancon has sold multiple versions of their sound Voltex controller. This is the second edition. The first edition, I originally reviewed it a long time ago back in 2019. That one, I eventually bought a new case for it and got a custom cover for it. I call it the Modelista controller because it looks like Modelista's RKR jacket. But yeah, I actually lent that one to a friend because she didn't have a sound Voltex controller she wanted to play at home, so I just lent it to her, and it's been there for the past 2+ years. I don't know what happened to the controller. But yes, this is the newer edition of the Yuancon controller. It is much smaller than the Force 2, especially if you compare it size-wise, just from here. I don't really use this controller anymore because for some reason when I lent this controller to Zechi, he left it at the side of his room, not touching it, and then when he actually did try to use it, the right encoder died. I have no idea why this knob is dead, but it's dead. And it was working fine when I passed it to him, so I don't know what happened. To be honest, I really like the form factor, the fact that it's just way more compact compared to the Force 2, except that they eventually changed the controller to a bigger version with more LEDs because the only way Yuan knows how to market its products is to add more LEDs. Basically, one of the biggest glaring issues with this controller was actually the fact that it was too small. If you can see here, the acrylic has started to crack near the screws, which was a huge problem for customers because shipping would destroy the acrylic plate on the very top, or just over time use, when you screw in the screws, it would just crack the acrylic. And the thing is, this design of the controller, the only way to take it apart is to remove the top acrylic piece. There is no screws on the bottom except for the rubber feet. And that caused a huge problem for Yuan because there were a lot of controllers that were just breaking. As an even newer version of the Yuancon controller, they have this one that's extremely budget that looks horrible. The other thing with Yuancon controllers in general is that their controllers, their lights are really dim. This is actually a software and hardware side fault. But yeah, I heard Yuan has new PCB, so those dim lights are no longer an issue. Now for my next Sound Voltex con, my biggest Giga Chad one. Oh boy. And that would be my SVRE9. This is the only Sound Voltex controller I've actually paid for. The rest was sent to me by Yuan or Dao. Why did I get SVRE9? I guess I really wanted to pimp out my setup. I don't use it right now because, I mean, this controller is huge. It's massive. It's absolutely huge. The SVRE9 uses arcade knobs, which is very nice. I love it. Although, to be honest, I prefer the Force 2. These have Chinese buttons on them. They used to have Sanwas, but then I sold the Sanwas, sold it to a friend who actually hasn't paid me yet. It's been a year. I'm starting to think that I won't get my money anymore. Anyways, most people have never seen an SVR9. I mean, this thing is like, what, $400+? Gamo 2 Products has always had a magnetic back. I complained in the Force 2 review that the magnetic backing on his older controllers were not good, and showed myself opening SVSC5, and I made a note that on the SVSC5, opening the magnetic cover is not so bad, but check this out. Whew. That's kinda... It's so long, and this thin acrylic sheet, it kind of bends, and it's kind of scary actually. Not to mention that you have to align it perfectly if you want to close it in properly. Maintenance, even though it was easy to remove the cover, it actually became a bigger headache than anything else. And I'm so glad that the Force 2 has an easy to remove cover. Oh my god, I can't get it on correctly, holy shit. I got this SVRE9 back in 2020, and there's one thing I noticed. If you look up really old videos of SVRE9s, their knobs have these lights that look so good, but mine doesn't. And if you look at videos of people with the newer versions of SVRE9s, they don't have lights either. So I don't know what happened to those lights and whether they actually were there, but that's something I noticed and something I was disappointed when I got this thing. Now for the ones that are not arcade accurate, which would be the pocket controllers. I have Mons Pocket Voltex here. I've shown it in my previous video where I reviewed the Pico Voltex. Another one. They're not arcade accurate. Of course, they're tiny. They're really cute. I love them. To be honest, I really prefer how the Pocket Voltex sounds compared to the Pico. Man, acrylic stacks can sound so marbly, if that makes sense. Cute gimmicks. I didn't pay for this one. I actually did pay for this one. So yeah, in total that would actually be 7 Sound Voltex controllers. I have more Sound Voltex controllers than the limbs on my body, and that's kind of why I got rid of one of the Force 2s, because that's way too many. Next up, let's talk about Beatmania IIDX. I think a lot of people already know what 2DX is, but if you don't, it's a game where you press 7 buttons and a turntable. This is an arcade game as well. This one is a Yuancon Platinum Edition 2DX controller. Yuan sent me this all the way back in 2019. I remember being pretty into 2DX. I'm not very good at the game though. The last most notable thing I've managed to do is clear Safari. I managed to get 7 done, but 8 done? Last song right now is really hard. 6 is... that one's worse. These are Chinese buttons. It's a nice controller. The only problem is that the turntable here it's not a matte, it's acrylic, and I always thought that was such a weird choice. It really just saves on cost without the whole rubber mat on top of it. And even the newer versions of Yuancon 2DX controllers right now, they use acrylic turntables without a mat on it, and that's just such a strange decision, especially since the controller prices has only been going higher and higher, and yet the controllers still don't have a rubber mat on this thing. It's just acrylic. It's usable, it's fine, it's just what? Alright, next up is the Phoenix one. I love this controller. If you're looking for a 2DX controller, this is the most jacked out controller you can get. I wouldn't say that the Force 2 is even in the same sphere as this thing. I think this thing is nicer than Force 2. As you can see, all the buttons here are white. That's kind of what happened to the Yuancon's buttons. I kind of just swapped them over. As you guys can see, this is the older version of the Phoenix one. The newer version right now doesn't have this dongle thing. The newer version right now, I think it uses 2 separate cables, only the 2 USBs. And they're both connected separately into the back. The turntable on the Phoenix one is extremely different. Instead of using the regular turntable material that the arcade uses, they use their own silicone mat. To be honest, I don't really like this mat that much because 1, it gets dirty really easily, and 2, it's actually way too rough. Like, the Yuancon is smooth, this is way too rough. This is like the opposite spectrum, but I know there's a lot of people out there who love this thing because it's easy to do like pinky scratches, or like, I don't know, straight up wrist scratch, I guess, but yeah. One of the most genius things that I still really love about Phoenix one is that they have this containment at the back. This is so nice. Really easy cable management. Wow. If you ever forget, you don't need to look up the manual. I actually kind of prefer this over how the Force 2 and other controllers have detachable cables. I keep losing the cables, to be honest. This is very clean. I've actually changed out the button lights on my Phoenix one. A really long time ago, this person that was selling brighter LEDs, and I was suggested to use these brighter LEDs on my Yuancon because Yuancon's lights are dim. The brighter LEDs did make my Yuancon brighter, but it makes Gamuto controllers, which is way brighter than normal Yuancon controllers, like even brighter. For some reason, my brain went, yeah, I'll buy 6 blue brighter LEDs. Since I only bought 6, right, all of them are using brighter LEDs except for this one button here, and you can clearly see like the brightness difference, and I have made a mistake. But well, I think the person who sold these brighter LEDs, he's not selling them right now, and I don't think he will ever sell them again, so I guess I'm stuck with 6 bright LEDs and 1 that is not as bright. The truth is that I actually had another Gamuto controller, and it was the FPS controller. That one a friend bought for me, and in return I also bought him one, so I guess it was as good as me just buying on my own. I'm not selling my FPS controller because at the time, well, I had the Phoenix one, I had the Yuancon, and then I had the FPS controller, and I also had another friend that's lent me a 2DX RED controller, and I had so many 2DX controllers, and I was like, let me just get rid of one of them. The FPS controller was alright, it was nice. I thought the small turntable was pretty cute. And to be honest, I quite miss the FPS controller because, well, as you can see here, the Phoenix one and the Yuancon, they have big turntables because these are arcade accurate. These are the size of the arcade. The FPS, it still had arcade distance, but the turntable was like a lot shorter, like this small. It didn't affect too much how you play, except for doing the big turns. Still very playable, and to be honest, I quite miss the smaller size because, well, this controller is actually like kind of big. Alright, it's somewhere here. Yep, there we go. Wow, this has yellowed a lot. This is my 3rd 2DX controller. This is actually a KOC, Konami official controller. So it is Konami official. It was one of those controllers they sold back in the day for PS2 Beatmania. Yeah, the controller is a lot smaller and it's actually not arcade accurate. Like, the buttons are arcade accurate, but the distance between the buttons and the turntable is not arcade accurate. So it's a lot easier to scratch like this. This actually uses a PS2 connector, so you can't use it on your PC, but I did modify it to USB. There's an Arduino inside this thing. I wouldn't really recommend anyone get a KOC because the buttons are this really gross membrane actually. This is the Japan version. You can tell because the sides here, there's corners. The US version of the KOCs, they are rounded, like completely round at the turntable side. So in total, that's 3 2DX controllers. And now, let's go through Taiko. If you have no idea what Taiko is, it's also another Japanese arcade game where you hit a drum to dons and kas to the beat. Don is the red notes, they are in the middle, and ka are the blue notes, and you hit the rims. Alright, so the first drum here, there's Tatakon. We have the I think this one is the Dobe Tatakon, the one with this really gross mushy membrane surface. I did that drum comparison thing, and that video is huge, so you've probably seen this thing. Yeah, it's gross, don't get it. The Hori Tatakon. Very solid, great place for anyone to start Taiko. It is quite pricey, I think it's like $70 to $90. But with some modding, which you can do on this thing, you can make it quite sensitive and it's just really nice. And here, the legs are missing. They're still in my bed, but I don't want to put them on. IIDX Tatakon, I made a review on it like a couple months ago. It's a shame that the software on the IIDX is RNG. Some people said that they didn't have any issues with how it performed. Other people said they did. Overall, what a shame. This thing is built very similar to the Hori, except better, but the software is kind of garbage, so wouldn't recommend it. Over here, I I have the PS4 Hori Tatakon. To be honest, the PS4 Tatakon is actually better than the Switch Tatakon. The drum skin is thinner on the PS4. This means that if you were to put something hard inside like wood or cork, your drumsticks will bounce better off of this compared to the one with the Switch skin on it, because the one with the Switch skin on it is more like, it's thicker, softer, it'll absorb your hits instead of being hard so that your sticks will vibrate off of them. Also the PS4, if you take it apart, the sensors actually go all around the controller. For the Switch, the sensors go from here to here. The PS4 Tatakon is actually not mine. This is actually Zeshi's, so I don't consider it mine. This is just 3 of the Tatakons I have. And now for the big boy. Say hello to my one and only love. This is the Taiko Force. It is a massive drum compared to the Tatakons. It's just amazing. I've already gone through about it. The rolling, the sensitivity, it's insane. These are Bashi. I've talked about them before. I actually have quite the number of them. These ones are long stick ones. They're good for rolling. Like that. I also have another super roll one, which is also very good. I have these really cursed, transparent Bashi made of acrylic, and they feel really weird. It feels like you took normal Bashi except you attached weights right at the end. So it's this weird feeling of weight. And here I have another pair of Bashi. This was my favorite pair until I lent it to a friend and then he broke it, and it's kind of split into half right here. That's not good. It feels weird when you hit now. Here is a bit off compared to the other. Jasper, please get me another pair of Bachi. You broke my favorite ones. Here is another pair that I bought recently. This one is the official My Bashi from Namco. That's very cute, very nice. They actually sold 3 different versions of 3 different colors: red, blue, and yellow. I got the yellow ones. To be honest, I kind of wish I got the blue or the red ones because they're quite interesting. And these are also a lot thinner than like usual Bashis that I'm used to. Look at that. That's quite thin. How do these feel? Yeah, right. I pretty much have this for collection purposes, and then when I go to the arcade. I actually have one more pair that I always use whenever I go to the arcade. I lent it to a friend and I've never seen it again. It's somewhere. And as for why I put cloth over my Taiko Force, that's because the Taiko Force is really loud. And so I put a cloth over it to make it less loud, and not to mention, the controller itself is ridiculously sensitive. Putting a cloth over dampens the sensitivity and makes it less sensitive. So it's a bit closer to the arcade, but still ridiculously sensitive. You can hear it's quieter now. But yes, I love this thing. Now for the rest of my controllers. For the rest of the games, I only own one for each because I don't have that many. But as for the one that is sticking out like a sore thumb under my bed right now, this is the Genbu/Yencon Groove Coaster controller. It's very dusty because I never touched this thing. Alright, so this controller is actually a Genbu Groove Coaster controller. Genbu is another controller company that apparently back then sold some Voltex controllers as well and were memed on for how bad they were. And I can see it shining in this controller too. Very laggy, lots of latency. I would not recommend you buy this for Groove Coaster, to be honest. The only thing I did was that I tried it a bit on the PC version of Groove Coaster, which was also another piece of laggy disaster. Yuan actually struck a deal with Genbu, I believe, back then, that he would resell their Groove Coaster controllers with the Yencon branding on it, and that's why this has the Yencon brand on it. I didn't end up reviewing this thing because 1, I don't really play Groove Coaster actually, so I haven't touched this since, and 2, the controller is not very great. However, I heard from Mon that you can replace the PCB on this thing to make it nicer. A bunch of Arduinos can quite possibly fix it. Alright, so what else do we have in here? It is the Guitar. This is a guitar controller for the game Guitar Dora. Guitar Dora actually came out before Guitar Hero and all that, so don't say that this is just a Guitar Hero copy, it's not. Guitar Dora is an arcade rhythm game with 2 parts. One is the Guitar Dora drums and the other is the Guitar Dora guitar. And this is the guitar controller for the guitar part of the game. I haven't really played it that much, and I've heard from other people who've tried this that is quite faithful to the arcade and it is very close. Unfortunately, I don't play much Guitar Dora because, well, I've been a bit distracted with every other game. Definitely one of the nicer, heftier controllers I have. This bottom part here, whoa, that's heavy. And the strum, very sturdy. Next up, we have one more up there, and that would be a Guitar Hero controller. Yeah, I actually have one, even though I've not made a single Guitar Hero video on my channel. This here is a Guitar Hero Explorer controller. One of the few USB ones. I even got the adapter for it. I'm not even sure how I got my hands on this. I found it on the secondhand store. I got it for Zeshi actually, but he passed it back to me because I need to fix the strum. The strum switch here, they're double pressing and stuff like that. I don't think I need to explain what the game Guitar Hero is. I think everyone watching probably already knows. But yeah, until I fix the strum, I can't really play Guitar Hero and neither can Zechi. I really like how much lighter this is compared to Guitadora controllers. I think it's nice, and nowadays you can get Guitar Hero controllers for Guitar Hero on the second-hand store for like pretty cheap. So if you ever find one, go ahead and get one. Just make sure it's compatible with Clone Hero and mod away and get your parts. And there's two other controllers I have that I don't have on me right now because I lent them to friends. And the first one I'll be talking about is Project Diva. It's a Voltex arcade rhythm game. It's not really arcade anymore because Singapore arcades have removed all Project Diva arcade cabinets, and I think the arcade game is dying. But you can play Project Diva on consoles like the PS4 and the Switch. You don't need an arcade controller to play Project Diva unless you really want that arcade Project Diva cabinet experience. I had the Gamo 2 Diva Le controller and I reviewed this on the channel actually, and I still have the controller. I just lent it to a friend who lent it to a friend, and it's been with that friend since the time I reviewed that video. And the last I heard, that person who has my controller is still using the controller and has friends coming over to have Project Diva arcade parties. And I'm glad that that controller is being used because I personally could not use that controller that much because out of all the controllers I have in my house, that one was the loudest one. Yeah, it was louder than Taiko, which is impressive. The round circular buttons is really what makes it so loud. That's also why I don't own a Pop-In controller. Pop-In is a really fun game. It's another arcade game. It's 9 keys. All of those 9 keys uses those circular round buttons. So as you can imagine, those controllers for Pop-In are huge and incredibly loud. So yeah, I don't think I'll be able to get into Pop-In unless I only play an arcade. Alright, just editing the video and I just remembered I actually have another Project Diva controller. It's that mini tiny one, and I legit forgot that existed, and I probably should play on that thing more since it's like smaller and quieter. But yeah, I legit just forgot I had that thing. So make that 2 Project Diva controllers. And as for my next controller, well, I can show B-roll of it right now actually. This is a DDR mat. I lent it to Zechi because he wanted to play some not ITG. It's been with him since. It's this energy foam pad, and I think it's quite nice. The sensors are very sensitive, and one thing I really like about the pad is the fact that the sensors are raised from the padding, so you can actually feel where each spot is. It's quite pricey looking at the prices online, and in the end when I got it, I didn't really use it that much. I wouldn't really recommend people buy these foam pads though. A lot of people out there who play DDR at home, they just straight up tell you, go get a metal pad. They are very much more worth it. Although foam pad wise, I guess that one is probably one I would say is good, but then again, it's the only one I have. I've looked up this energy pad that I own. I haven't used it much and neither has Zechi, so we haven't encountered any issues. People on Reddit are pointing out like the sensors breaking and stuff like that, so research at your own risk. So yeah, here are all my controllers in one go, and that is a lot of them. I'll go highlight which ones I actually paid money for, and I kind of want a Tritium controller. I could ask Gamo 2 for a Tassler, or to be honest, that Openitum controller on GitHub is kind of making me act up. So that's it for the video today. Go check Buyee out, and I'm so sorry about the promised video this week. It was supposed to be something else. I know. I wanted to spend more time working on that video. So wait for it next week, and thank you so much for watching.